Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking a journey that is less about simple travel and more about, well, compressed history. We're heading to the absolute vital center of the Mediterranean Sea, a single triangular island that has served as the crossroads, the granary, the battlefield, and the cultural laboratory of Western civilization for 7,000 years.
That's right.
We are diving deep into the history, the fire, and the flavor of Sicily.
And we really have to emphasize that word, centrality. Sicily isn't just an island. For most of history, it was the ultimate cultural nexus.
Focal point.
Exactly. Think of it as the place where nearly every major power, Greek, Phoenician, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, Norman, Spanish, they all had to stake a claim.
Right.
And cultures here didn't just meet. They crashed, they combined, and they synthesized into something totally new. The density of history there is, it's something few other places on Earth can match.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that density. We're looking at the largest and most populous island in the entire Mediterranean, physically separated from the Italian peninsula only by that famously narrow Strait of Messina.
And it is so narrow. At its tightest point, it's only about 3 kilometers wide.
You can practically see across it. It's
Yeah.
touchable, yet for centuries, that little gap has felt like an ocean.
It is a geographical anomaly, so close yet so culturally distinct. The island supports, about 4.7 million people across 25,832 square miles. And crucially, it's one of Italy's 5 politically autonomous regions.
And that autonomy itself hints at a long history of, wanting to do its own thing, resisting control.
Absolutely. A history of self-determination, or at least trying to achieve it.
And its very core identity, its origin story, is literally etched into its geometry. I love this part. The roughly triangular shape is what earned it the ancient Greek name Trinakria.
Meaning having 3 headlands. And that triangular structure isn't just trivia, it's the symbolic map of the island. You see it immortalized on the modern flag with that striking triskelion.
That's the symbol with the 3 legs bent at the knee, right?
Yeah, surrounding the Gorgonian head and 3 wheat ears. It's a very powerful image.
When you look at that flag, it immediately tells you the story of exposure and bounty. The 3 capes Pelorus in the northeast, Pecanus to the south, and Lilybaeum to the west, they're the landing points.
And the wheat ears symbolize the fertility, the wealth that all those invaders were after. And the Gorgonian head, Medusa, is like a warning, isn't it? A warning to anyone who dares try to take it.
It sets the stage perfectly. Our mission today is to move beyond just the facts and analyze how this specific, highly exposed and highly fertile location turned it into a perpetual battleground.
We'll be tracing the layers of history, the Greek science, the Arab irrigation, the Norman law, all the things that combine to create its unique art, its distinct language, and above all, its glorious cuisine.
Let's start that 7,000-year journey then, jumping straight into this incredibly dense history of conquest and cultural synthesis.
Okay, so we're talking about a human presence dating back to the late Pleistocene, around 14,000 BC. But when the historical narrative really starts to take shape, you have these 3 classical indigenous inhabitants who were already there fighting over the best land before any of the major powers showed up.
And those are the Sicani, the Elymians, and the Sicels. So who are the original inhabitants and how did they all get along?
Well, get along might be a strong word. The Sicani were the most ancient and prominent group. They held the central and western parts. Classical historians like Thucydides thought they came from the Iberian Peninsula.
Okay.
They were then pushed eastward when the Elymians, who likely came from the Aegean Sea, settled in the northwestern tip. They founded important early settlements like Segesta.
And then the people who actually gave the island its name arrived much later.
That's right, the Sicels. They came from the Italian mainland, right across the Strait of Messina, around 1200 BC, and they settled on the eastern side. It was their name, Sicilia, that eventually morphed into Sicily.
So you already have this complex, often warring local dynamic.
Exactly, and that whole setup was about to be utterly overwhelmed by the arrival of the great colonizers.
Enter Magna Graecia. We're talking about the Greeks colonizing Sicily from about 750 BC, and they basically turned the island into a literal extension of Greek culture.
It was an incredible period of intellectual and architectural flourishing. Places like Syracuse, Akragas, which is modern Agrigento, Salonante, Gela, these were not minor outposts.
No,
They're massive, thriving cities, rivaling those in Greece itself. The Greeks successfully introduced large-scale cultivation of olives and grapes, which created tremendous wealth and trade. For centuries, Sicily was arguably the wealthiest part of the entire Greek world.
But as you said, prosperity breeds conflict. And this Greek dominance immediately attracted a major rival from North Africa.
Carthage, founded by the Phoenicians. The resulting Sicilian Wars, stretching from 580 to 265 BC, were just brutal and relentless. It was a centuries-long tug-of-war between the powerful Greek kingdom of Syracuse, which dominated the east, and the Carthaginians, who controlled the west.
A military laboratory, as you put it.
It was. And this stalemate was only broken by the arrival of the ultimate external power broker, Rome.
Of course.
The Punic Wars, starting in 264 BC, were fundamentally Rome versus Carthage, fighting for supremacy across the Western Mediterranean. And Sicily was the initial necessary springboard for that conflict.
Rome won, and by 242 BC, Sicily becomes Sicilia, Rome's very first province outside the Italian peninsula.
That is a staggering realization, isn't it? Sicily wasn't just part of the Roman Empire. It was the blueprint for how Rome governed its entire empire.
It set the template.
It did, for provincial administration, for exploitation. Sicily's primary role was foundational. It became the Roman Republic's vital granary. It supplied the immense quantities of wheat needed to feed Rome and, maintain stability in the capital.
And when we talk about the Roman conquest, we have to pause at the siege of Syracuse. It gave us one of the most poignant and, well, tragic anecdotes in the history of science.
We have to remember Archimedes. He was a native of Syracuse, arguably the greatest mathematician and inventor of antiquity. He used his genius to defend the city against the Romans during the Second Punic War.
The stories are legendary, the grappling cranes and the focusing mirrors.
Exactly, using these complex war machines to destroy Roman ships. It's legendary stuff.
But the anecdote turns tragic.
It does. When the Romans finally captured Syracuse in 212 BC, Archimedes was killed by a Roman soldier, even though the general, Marcellus, had given specific orders to spare him.
Wow.
It's just a powerful symbol of how genius can be extinguished by the chaos of war.
And while Rome brought a kind of stability, it definitely didn't guarantee good governance. We see that classic pattern of provincial abuse setting in pretty quickly.
The best example is the catastrophic misgovernment by Gaius Verus, who was governor between 73 and 71 BC. His corruption, extortion, theft of art, sheer cruelty. It was so egregious that it led to a sharp economic decline.
And his trial was made famous by Cicero's speeches, right?
Yes, in Verem. Cicero's orations basically laid out a textbook case of provincial abuse. It's a vital lesson. Even the most important provinces could be ruined by unchecked power.
And even though Latin was introduced by Rome, you mentioned that the culture in the east of the island remained fundamentally Greek. Why didn't Latin fully take over?
Well, the Greek influence had been entrenched for 5 centuries. It was the language of commerce, literature, the educated elite. The Romans were mostly focused on administration and resource extraction.
Right.
This resilience, this potential for re-Hellenization, meant that when the Western Roman Empire started to collapse, Sicily just easily slid back into the Eastern Greek-speaking sphere of influence.
And that transition leads us into what you call the chaotic Dark Ages handoff. The island became a political hot potato.
A very valuable hot potato. After the Western Empire fell, you see this succession of Germanic rulers. First, the Vandals, who seized North Africa, they briefly occupied Palermo in the mid-5th century. Then, the Ostrogoths took control, starting in 477.
But this was all temporary.
Very temporary. It was just a buffer before the resurgence of Constantinople.
Which brings in the Byzantines in 535 AD. This represents a return to Greek influence and a period of incredible strategic importance.
Absolutely. General Belisarius reconquered the island for Emperor Justinian I, and he used Sicily as the essential logistical base to launch a campaign to retake Italy.
So the island's Greek-speaking population would have welcomed them?
They did, and Greek language and culture once again became predominant.
And for a brief, just glorious moment, Sicily was the absolute center of the world.
This is where it gets really interesting. In 660 AD, facing immense pressure in the east from the new Arab caliphates and a lot of internal strife, the Emperor Constans II made this radical decision.
What did he do?
He moved the capital of the entire Eastern Roman Empire from Constantinople to Syracuse.
Wait, the entire capital? But Sicily, why would he do that with all the threats in Anatolia?
It was a strategic gamble, and one that ultimately failed. He was hoping to better coordinate the defense of the Western territories, Italy, North Africa, against the Lombards and the extending Islamic forces.
So he was recentering the empire.
He was trying to. It emphasized Sicily's critical central position, but it only lasted for 8 years. Constans II was assassinated in 668, probably by nobles who saw the move as an abandonment of Constantinople, and the capital immediately moved back.
And the stage was now perfectly set for the next colossal cultural force, the Arab Emirate.
The story of the Arab conquest is just full of high drama. It started in 827 AD when a Byzantine commander named Euphemius, who had committed some serious crimes, killed his wife, forced a nun to marry him, was condemned by the emperor.
So he was a fugitive.
He was. He fled to Tunisia and offered the Aghlabid emir rule of Sicily in exchange for military support.
So a moment of intense personal treachery led to a global shift of power.
Exactly. And the conquest itself was long and brutal. It took over a century. Syracuse fell in 878, Taormina not until 962. But the transition to Arab rule marked a staggering cultural shock point. It led to an age of unparalleled prosperity.
Why was it so much more prosperous than under the Romans or Byzantines?
Because the Arabs viewed the land as an investment, not just a granary to be plundered. They completely revolutionized the agriculture through sophisticated engineering.
Okay, how so?
Crucially, they introduced the Qanat irrigation systems. These are these genius underground channels that capture mountain runoff and carry water to the dry plains, which vastly expanded the amount of arable land.
That's a huge shift in technology.
And in crop science, they brought in entirely new, highly profitable cash crops. Lemons, oranges, sugarcane, rice, cotton. This made Sicily one of the wealthiest regions in the entire Islamic world.
The cities must have exploded.
They did. We have this incredible account from an Arab merchant, Ibn Hakal, who visited Palermo in 950. He described a city so bustling that he estimated 7,000 butchers were trading across 150 shops. Palermo became a global metropolis.
And the Arabs also divided the island administratively in a very interesting way.
Yes, into three regions, or vals. Val di Mazzara in the west, which became heavily Islamized. Val d'Amon in the mountainous northeast, which stayed predominantly Christian and Greek-speaking. And Val di Noto in the southeast.
It sounds like a shrewd strategy of controlled autonomy. Let the Greek Christians keep their culture to ensure loyalty.
It seems that way. But inevitably, this era, too, was destined to end.
And this time, the agents of change were the Normans.
Originally, Viking mercenaries from northern France who arrived, ironically, hired by the Byzantines as mercenaries in 1038.
So they came to fight for the Byzantines and ended up taking the island for themselves.
That's the story. Roger Reed led the invasion in 1061. They were opportunists, militarily disciplined, and politically decisive. They took Messina with just 700 knights, Palermo a decade later, and completed the conquest by 1091.
And the Norman Golden Age that followed, especially under Roger II, is often described as one of the most luminous cultural periods in European history. What made their rule so exceptionally syncretic?
The Norman rulers were practical men. They realized they were a tiny military elite governing these massive, sophisticated populations of Arabs and Greeks, so they didn't try to impose wholesale change overnight.
Right.
Roger II famously admired and fostered the existing cultures. His administration was cosmopolitan. He kept Arab palace eunuchs, used Greek tax forms, employed scholars from every background.
So you get this truly multilingual legal and administrative system that's almost unheard of in medieval Europe.
Exactly. Laws were issued in Latin, Greek, or Arabic, depending on the community. This created an environment that attracted scholars, scientists, and poets from across the known world. For a time, Sicily was the intellectual capital of Europe.
Yet, despite this incredible initial tolerance, the Norman era marked the definitive shift in identity. How did the island go from being two-thirds Arabic and Greek-speaking to becoming fully Latinized and Roman Catholic?
That's the crucial internal tension of the Norman period. While Roger II was culturally tolerant, he was strategically focused on securing his kingdom against potential Arab or Byzantine rivals.
And to do that,
The Normans instituted massive immigration policies. They imported settlers, often called Lombards, from northern Italy and also from France and England.
these Latin-speaking Roman Catholic settlers gradually swamped the established populations, tilting the demographics forever.
Yes, the influx was strategic. They settled in regions that had been Arab strongholds, and over time they changed the linguistic and religious landscape completely.
And following the Normans, the crown passed to the German Hohenstaufen dynasty, which brings in the towering, complex figure of Frederick II.
Frederick II, crowned in 1198, was arguably the most extraordinary monarch of his time. Raised in Palermo, spoke Arabic, Greek, Latin. His court was a center of learning. He was called Stupor Mundi, the wonder of the world.
But his brilliance coincided with the tragic and violent destruction of the remaining Arab presence that the Normans had initially protected.
That is the dark side of his reign,
Yeah.
and a pivotal moment. After a series of Muslim rebellions, Frederick II forcibly moved the entire remaining Muslim population, estimated at 60,000 people, to the city of Lucera in Apulia between 1221 and 1226.
That one action fundamentally removed 1,000 years of continuous Arab cultural and agricultural input from the island.
It destroyed the vibrant, multi-layered society the Normans had fostered. From then on, Sicily's cultural identity would be shaped primarily by successive European powers.
After Frederick's line died out, the French House of Anjou was installed, which proved to be a disaster.
Which brings us to one of the most powerful displays of Sicilian political will, the Sicilian Vespers in 1282. The Vespers were a successful, bloody revolt against the French, triggered by immense popular opposition to their mistreatment and crushing taxation. The local people rose up and massacred almost the entire French population on the island.
It's a horrifying moment, but it shows that deep resilience and ferocity of Sicilian identity when threatened.
And this successful uprising led to Peter III of Aragon taking the throne, which initiated a long period of profound Spanish influence that lasted for centuries.
And with Spanish rule came the Inquisition,
which led directly to the expulsion of all Jews in 1492. This ended a continuous Jewish presence that had lasted for at least 1,400 years, further eroding the island's ancient diversity.
and all this political turmoil was matched by intense geological turmoil.
Absolutely. Think of the Black Death, which arrived in Europe first via a ship docking in Messina in 1347, then destructive earthquakes. The one in 1693 was catastrophic. It killed an estimated 60,000 people and required the total rebuilding of dozens of towns.
And on top of all that, continuous external military threats.
North African slave raids were a persistent existential threat. They discouraged coastal settlement all the way up until the 19th century.
The island's politics kept bouncing around Savoy, Habsburgs, before finally settling under the Bourbon Kingdom of the Two Sicilies in 1816, which brings us to the dawn of unified Italy.
And that unification was preceded by major, though suppressed, revolutionary movements in 1820 and 1848, showing that the yearning for better governance was strong.
The end of the Bourbons came quickly.
In 1860, Giuseppe Garibaldi's Expedition of the Thousand landed at Marsala. Crucially, native Sicilians and local militias eagerly joined his forces, and Sicily became part of the new Kingdom of Italy in 1861.
But this moment, which promised so much, was immediately marked by a severe, enduring economic struggle.
This is the crux of the Southern question. Unification did not bring the anticipated economic uplift. The Sicilian economy remained deeply underdeveloped compared to the industrializing North. The new Italian government just neglected the South.
And the social consequence of that neglect was massive, unprecedented emigration.
The sheer scale is difficult to overstate. Millions of Sicilians left, heading to North and South America and Australia. Today, it's estimated that 10 million people of Sicilian origin live around the world.
And it was in this very climate of weak central authority, endemic poverty, and land struggles that the organized crime syndicate, the Cosa Nostra, or mafia, truly came into its own.
Its origins are firmly rooted in that post-feudal landscape. When the monarchy failed to provide law and order, private enforcers were hired by wealthy landowners to protect their property from bandits.
So it started as a sort of shadow government, filling a power vacuum.
Exactly. And their first documented contacts with the Italian government were around the time of unification. The state needed local power brokers to manage the transition, and the mafia provided that service, rapidly evolving from mere protection into sophisticated organized crime.
Efforts to defeat the mafia have been cyclical and often violent.
The fight has been relentless. The fascist era under Sigismund, the Iron Prefect, and later the judicial efforts of the 1980s and 90s, led by martyrs like Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino.
Their sacrifices were pivotal in bringing global attention to the problem.
They paid the ultimate price, and their memory galvanizes modern efforts. But the struggle continues. We know those transnational links are still strong. As recently as 2019, reports confirmed Sicilian mafia groups were coordinating with American crime families, like the Gambinos.
And looking at current demographics, that economic struggle persists. The island is populous, but the negative migration points to that persistent problem of employment.
The figures are stark. In 2018, the unemployment rate was over 21%, one of the highest in Europe. The Southern question is still a very real thing.
That economic backdrop must make the environmental challenges even harder. Switching gears dramatically, let's talk about the physical forces that literally defined this land. You cannot understand Sicily without confronting its tectonic volatility.
Geographically, Sicily sits right on the northern edge of the African plate. which is colliding with the Eurasian plate. This makes the island intensely volcanic and seismically active. And that geological position is responsible for its most potent symbol, Mount Etna.
Etna is more than just a volcano. It dominates the eastern coast and is globally recognized as a cultural icon.
It is Europe's tallest and most active volcano, in an almost constant state of eruption. It's woven into the very identity of eastern Sicily, appearing in classical myths about the Forge of Hephaestus.
And it's part of a wider, volatile geological complex that extends right into the sea.
Look north to the Aeolian Islands volcano, Stromboli, Lipari, a spectacular volcanic archipelago. The whole region is unstable. There's even an underwater volcano, Ferdinandea, which last erupted in 1831 and briefly formed an island.
And beyond the fire, the climate itself is prone to extremes.
We have the typical Mediterranean climate, but the extremes are getting more severe. In August 2021, near Syracuse, the island recorded a temperature of 48.8 degrees Celsius, which at the time was a new record for Europe.
Wow. And what about the rivers and the flora? We discussed earlier how the Roman use of the island as a granary had severe long-term consequences.
It did. Sicily is a classic example of human-driven climate change through deforestation. The process began in Roman times. The result is a much drier climate today.
So is the land completely barren now?
Not entirely. Important forests remain in the mountains, especially near Etna and in the Nebrodi Mountains. These areas preserve unique fauna, like the European wildcat and the golden eagle, though sadly the endemic Sicilian wolf was hunted to extinction.
That brings us to a topic that aims to redefine Sicily's geopolitical identity, the Strait of Messina Bridge.
Ah, the bridge. A decades-long political and engineering saga. The idea of linking Sicily to the Italian peninsula has been around since ancient times. The modern design is for a spectacular suspension bridge spanning 3.6 kilometers.
And it's been a political football, right? Canceled and revived multiple times.
Precisely. Canceled in 2006, again in 2013, mainly due to budget concerns and legitimate worries about the seismic risk. But in 2023, the current government revived the project.
And what is the official status now?
It received final government approval as recently as August 2025. With construction slated to begin in the autumn of 2025. They're aiming for a 2032 completion. If it happens, it will be the longest suspension bridge in the world.
The significance here goes way beyond a construction record, doesn't it?
It's transformative.
Yeah.
It makes Sicily an essential, rather than peripheral, part of Europe's critical transport infrastructure. It's a key link in the Berlin-Palermo railway axis. For the first time, Sicily will be fully integrated into the continental framework.
A geographic link that is sorely needed, given the economic struggle we just talked about. Let's move into the current economy and understand the balance between industry, finance, and that famous volcanic bounty.
Despite the high unemployment, Sicily is the 8th largest regional economy in Italy, though its GDP per capita is still below the national average. And it's heavily weighted toward the service sector.
So agriculture, despite being what Sicily's famous for, isn't the biggest part of the economy.
No, it's a relatively modest portion, around 3.5% of GDP. Industry is also under 10%. The biggest sectors are things like finance, real estate, commerce, and transport.
But Sicily has managed to carve out some highly specialized industrial districts that show real potential.
3 are key. First, Catania, known as the Etna Valley. This is the hub for electronics, hosting giants like ST Microelectronics. It's Sicily's attempt to compete in the 21st century knowledge economy.
And the others.
The Syracuse petrochemical district is vast, with oil refineries and chemical industries. And Palermo hosts key infrastructure, like shipyards and mechanical factories.
So the island isn't purely agricultural. It clearly has significant natural resources.
Absolutely. Petroleum, natural gas, asphalt fields near Ragusa. Central Sicily has massive salt deposits, and Trapani is a major sea salt producer.
But when most people think of Sicilian wealth, they think of the unique products that grow in that volcanic soil.
And rightly so. The combination of the climate and the soil is a recipe for specialized high-value agriculture. The island is known for its incredible range of protected designation of origin GOP and IGP products.
Which ones really stand out?
Well, the citrus, for one, the Arancia Rosa di Sicilia IGP, the unique blood orange, whose color is often enhanced by the temperature swings near Etna, the super sweet Pomodoro di Pacino tomatoes, and then high-value specialties like the Pistacchio di Bronte, grown only on the slopes of Etna.
And the cheeses are iconic.
Ragusano, DOP, Pecorino Siciliano. And the wine is a powerhouse. Sicily is the 3rd largest wine producer in Italy, historically famous for Marsala, but now for Indigenous varieties like Nero di Vola and the reds grown near Etna, like Nerella mascalese?
And finally, as an island, fishing remains fundamental.
It is. Lazzara del Vado is one of the most important fishing centers in Italy, focusing on high-value fish like tuna and swordfish. The sea's bounty is just as essential as the land's.
This incredible density of history and geography translates directly into an almost unparalleled cultural legacy and huge tourism value. The island has 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Let's just focus on the ones that best illustrate the layering of cultures we've discussed.
That's the best way to do it. You have to start with the Valle dei Templi in Agrigento. This is Magna Graecia in its purest, most breathtaking form. It represents that initial Greek brilliance.
Then jump forward to the Roman layer, that's the Villa Romana del Casale.
This site is world famous for having the richest, largest, most complex collection of Roman mosaics anywhere. It speaks to Sicily's central role as the granary and the luxury enjoyed by the Roman elite there.
And finally, the ultimate synthesis of all the historical layers, the Arab-Norman Palermo and the cathedrals of Cefalù and Monreale.
This site is pure cultural genius. The architecture blends Byzantine mosaic artistry, Arab engineering and ornamentation, and Norman military architecture. It is physical proof that the cultural blending here was deep and harmonious, at least for a while.
Beyond the UNESCO sites, the history of conflict left an architectural legacy of paranoia in defense.
Absolutely. The island is dotted with hundreds of castles. But perhaps more telling is the vast network of 218 coastal watchtowers, the Torri Costiere della Sicilia.
And these weren't just random buildings.
No, they were necessary for survival. Designed largely in the late 16th century, they formed a complex early warning system against the constant threat of Barbary pirate raids from North Africa. That's why the coast remained underdeveloped for so long.
That brings us beautifully to the final cultural elements that truly define the island, starting with what I'd argue is the ultimate delicious synthesis of Sicilian history, the cuisine.
Sicilian cuisine is rightfully nicknamed God's kitchen. It is a direct culinary chronology. When you eat a typical Sicilian meal, you are literally tasting 7 millennia of invasion and integration.
What are the primary historical contributions that define the flavor profile?
The Greeks established the foundation. Fish, olives, wheat, grapes. The Arabs were transformative, introducing the key ingredients that make Sicilian sweets unique: sugar, citrus, rice, almonds, and essential spices like saffron and cinnamon.
So my cannoli has Arab history.
Absolutely. The ricotta is ancient, but the sugar, the fried shell, the citrus zest, that's all a marker of the Arab influence. Then the Normans brought a fondness for meat dishes, and much later the Spanish introduced New World goods like cocoa, peppers, and tomatoes.
It sounds like culinary chaos, but it results in these harmonious, iconic dishes.
It comes down to technique and time. Take arancini, the fried rice balls. The rice is Arab. The tomato sauce inside is Spanish. The technique is uniquely Sicilian.
Moving from the kitchen to the arts, the island has an incredible architectural tradition, especially after that massive 1693 earthquake.
That disaster required the total reconstruction of the Val di Noto region, and the result was the unique Sicilian Baroque style. It's distinguished by its successive curves, dramatic detailing, and the use of local red or golden sandstone. It's a style born directly from catastrophe.
And in the performing arts, we see that same grandeur.
Palermo hosts the Teatro Massimo, the largest opera house in Italy and the 3rd largest in Europe. And the island has produced giants like the composers Vincenzo Bellini and Alessandro Scarlatti.
And I'm fascinated by the traditional culture, like the marionette theater.
The Opera dei Pupi. It's a UNESCO intangible cultural heritage. These marionette performances depict the epic Frankish romantic poems, like the Song of Roland. This tradition stems directly from the troubadour culture imported by the Normans. It's living history.
Those ornate, colorful Sicilian carts are another ubiquitous symbol.
They are magnificent. Originally for transport, they became highly decorated status symbols. Along with the traditional capola flat cap, these are the visual markers of Sicilian cultural pride.
Finally, we have to touch on literature and language, because this island didn't just inherit culture, it invented major literary forms that define the Italian language.
This is perhaps Sicily's highest cultural achievement. In the 13th century, under Frederick II's court in Palermo, the Sicilian school was founded, a community of poets who created the very first Italian literary standard.
And they gave the world the sonnet.
Exactly. Giacomo da Lentini, the head poet of the school, is formally credited with inventing the sonnet form. This foundational work inspired every subsequent generation of Italian writers, including Dante, who famously claimed that all the poetry written by Italians can be called Sicilian.
That is an astonishing statement, and this legacy continues right up to the modern era with multiple Nobel laureates.
Luigi Pirandello and Salvatore Quasimodo, two Nobel winners. Pirandello is especially important for his exploration of masks, identity, the relativity of truth, themes that seem perfectly suited for an island with such a layered, shifting identity.
And we have Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa, whose work The Leopard captures the essence of that transition from the Bourbon era to unification.
The leopard is absolutely crucial. Its central theme, if we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change, is the most profound expression of Sicilian political fatalism and resilience.
And what about the language spoken today?
Most people are bilingual, speaking Italian and Sicilian, which is a distinct Romance language, not just a dialect. It's complex, with loan words from Greek, Arabic, Norman, Spanish. It's a living linguistic artifact.
So if we pull back, we've synthesized 7,000 years of history, from the original Sicily tribes through to modern electronics production in Etna Valley, powered by volcanic fertility and expressed through a magnificent multilingual literary tradition and a cuisine that literally tells the island's story.
Sicily is the ultimate tapestry woven by conquest, volcanoes, and intellectual brilliance. It was the granary of Rome, a capital for the Byzantine Empire, an economic powerhouse under the Arabs, and a luminous cultural center under the Normans. Its golden ages were never about homogeneity. They were defined by tolerant rulers who understood how to profit from complexity.
It's a profound microcosm of the entire Mediterranean, a place where every powerful force had to, at one point, make its mark.
And that is the key takeaway. Sicily is defined not by a single origin, but by the fact that cultures synthesized, creating something new and profoundly distinct. Its identity has always been rooted in its strategic centrality, yet also its separation, the surrounding sea, and critically, the Strait of Messina.
Which brings us back to the present and the future. That Strait of Messina bridge, the longest suspension bridge in the world, approved in 2025, set to open in 2032.
This final act of physical unification, permanently connecting the island to the continental railway axis, it raises a fascinating, provocative thought for us all to consider. The island's distinct, multi-layered soul has always thrived in a certain degree of isolation, defined by the journey and the effort required to reach it. When that gap is finally closed by concrete and steel, making Sicily seamlessly part of the European mainland, will this ultimate geographical connection fundamentally change that unique cultural identity? Or is the island's soul too strong, too complex, too defined by its internal history to be altered by a bridge? That is the perpetual discovery Sicily offers.